over the weekend, she was giving us some very, very powerful insight into both the layout and flow of the formal and preliminary council process. Like I said, Desiree and myself are familiar with certain directions folks are sitting when it's just women in a council process, but not as familiar, right, with what the diagram might look like when the women and men come together in the formal council process, right, or how they come together in the preliminaries, even, right. This was something that was still fairly vague because because there hasn't been a men's nation alongside the women's nation in the last few years. We hadn't seen this process, but Edith gave us some insight into what she's learned over the years, and let me see if I can
Yeah, I
get a
mean,
diagram.
thanks for Juliet bringing I think two women into the group. And one of the reasons why I wanted for you to be part of the buddy thing is that like you can also, that could be one of your test examples to to help more people like that we can set up the woman in participation process.
Yeah, no, yeah, and this is something that I saw in is Juliet still with us? Yeah, Juliet's intrinsic inventory as well. You know, it seems Juliet is really inspired to get some women's council processes going in stacks and advocates, and you know, this is something that we've always discussed as a as a as an important piece to ensuring women's voices aren't drowned out in the long term. And it's actually a big part of what we learned in the details of the council process from Edith this weekend. So thank you kindly for mentioning that, and thank you kindly for introducing me to Kaylee. Right, is the person I was
Yeah,
speaking to
there's
earlier.
Kaylee
Right.
and the other
Yeah,
one, Ki Kilcan, which
Kailani and
Kalani.
Kailani, Kailani and Kaylee, and then there's Good Kitty, but she hasn't signed up yet.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So
Thank you kindly.
Kalani, I've asked if Merrick can be the buddy. And Kaylee, I thought maybe you give it to you.
No, yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited. Um, I looked through your buddy flow as well, and I appreciate the guidance, the guidelines there, and of course they can evolve, like you said. No, thank you kindly for thinking about this. I think, you asked about its relevance to systems design a couple times, and I think the first time I said I think this is um, it's not a small part, right, to the systems design. The real time meetings, the interpersonal relationships is something Haas has spoken to quite a bit, and something that I think both myself and he appreciated with our experiences in source cred, right? And so, but also it's something we experience in stacks, right? With the when we're meeting a lot of brilliant folks, and we just fall into pretty deep, uh, you know, from my perspective, right? They're pretty deep relationships, right? They're not they're not like any other digital interaction that I've ever experienced before, particularly in stacks. Um, uh, and I don't think that this should be. I don't think it can be overstated in terms of it being replicated, and uh, I felt certainty as well, but also an empowerment. So uh, when it comes to horizontality and it comes to uh, you know these important parts of system design, those invisible exchanges that you know just one relationship is infinitely complex and nuanced. Um, this is the abundance, right? There's those type of relationships fractal out between us. This is the certainty and access to regenerative abundance that we're speaking to beyond monetary. And so I can't thank you enough, Hero, for taking the initiative on what might seem like not so much on the surface to folks that might see that post, but our conversations lend itself to just how huge it is to the system design, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have in terms of language we can use that lends itself to I guess the overlap, right, in the system design and what you've done already in the buddy system guidelines. But yeah, thank you kindly. But yeah, to get into what we recently learned from Edith and how it relates to matrilineal heritage, right? Even beyond the human realm or voices of women in the human realm, but to the matrilineal heritage, across all strains of life, right? Thank you, beautiful. This is let me try to get this diagram to you guys. Edith hand drew something for us, really for the sake of the meeting, and here we go. You guys might not be able to make it out so well. It's just her scribbling it down, but we can make some better diagrams out of it, of course. And what it's showing you is something that Hosby spoke to you about this during the making of the consensus flow spec stuff, where this could help us with legitimacy in asynchronous thread dialogues or in decision making. Just knowing who is looking at who can lend itself to what I think you call duty, what might be possible duties and whatnot. But there's also something that came across in this diagram in the dialogue with Edith that it's important for you guys to see the diagram when I'm describing it. Sorry, I'm so slow at this, y'all. Anyway, so I'm trying to get. Here it is. Okay. It's in the meeting chat there for y'all. And you'll see at the north, you have Wolf Clan, right? And you have both female and male representatives sitting next to each other, right? In this formal process. This is what the formal council process would look like. And it's the male that brings the issues to the floor, but because it's the female title holder that selects the female wolf, the women, right, that ultimately select the men, right, for title holder position, right, in consensus process. But the language is matrilineal authority, right, giving important sequencing to matrilineal heritage, right? If you don't understand regeneration of all these ecosystems and so on and so forth, you really have a hard time building anything, sustainably. And so, this is a big part of the process, right? But also you see across, it's flipped, where the female and male bears are sitting with their backs to the south. looking right across, right at the female and male wolves, and these are the deliberators, right? Um, and then you see the only clan that is not sitting together uh, in terms of male and female clan are the turtles. The turtles are looking directly across at each other with the females with their back to the west and the males with their backs to the east. And what's interesting is that during in the physical council process, during the deliberation, right, that does happen in the formal council, uh, the female and male bears are already sitting with each other. The female wolves and male wolves are already sitting with each other. So when they go into deliberation, nobody has to move. But at the same time, this is when the turtles go into, observing what was just presented on the positions on the floor and validating these positions, against Guyana Asada Skanagor, right? A great law of peace, or law, right? Based on these cosmologies. And it's the females that we're learning, right, that walk across to the males. It's again this motif in the Ginyaga culture that we see pop up. Men not being able to make the first move in particular context. And in this particular context, there's other contexts like a rabbit dance, where the women ask the men to dance, right? In this particular ceremony. Then, if you look at this particular context, this is the decision-making process, and these are the validators, these are the turtles. And the women walking across the floor is more than just a physical movement, right? It implies something about what has to happen in that process of coming together on a position, right? It indicates that balance comes from where there's more, right? The women being connected to this matrilineal heritage and capacity to understand not just male in the human realm, but male or female in the human realm. But if we're looking at these protocols as extrapolations from beyond the human realm, and you see female not as female woman, but as regenerative commons and sustainability, right? This has the capacity to see the positions of not the human male, right, but the conceptual male, right, which is not regenerative sustainability, right, but extraction, right, or scarcity, right. This sequencing again popping up becomes important. Welcome, Kaylee. We're deep in the weeds. You're welcome to join us. As I mentioned, we're kind of in the middle of going through a council process that's very exciting to talk about with folks, taken from these indigenous modes that are so near and dear to our research around alternative modes of consensus decision making or organization, right? And I don't know how much you're exposed to any of this, but welcome. You're welcome to chime in, introduce yourself, or stay quiet if you want as well. But we're happy to have you. And yeah, thank you kindly, Juliet, for the introduction, and Hero as well for the introduction to Kaylee. And let us know if you can hear us okay. And feel free to interrupt whenever you'd like, if you'd like. But there's also what I'm referencing. Sorry about the noise here. There's also what I'm referencing in the meeting chat, right above this voice channel, if you're interested it's just a hand-drawn diagram from a woman that we work closely with, Edith from the Longhouse of the Ginyaga-Haga, the Indigenous council that we are in direct dialogue with, right, for our research and development here. And what I was just getting into was a pretty powerful notion that we've learned just very recently over the weekend in terms of the details of the council process when the men and women clans come out of their respective autonomous decision-making processes in the preliminary meetings of the clans. And then we also learned that both female and male representatives will report what's happening in the preliminaries of these autonomous processes leading up to a formal decision-making process where all of the positions have and all of the consensus has a lot of it has happened in these autonomous preliminaries, but there's this formalizing of it in the formal council process, which is very interesting because it seems like a streamlining of horizontal or bottom-up voices rather than a minimizing of these voices in conventional boardroom structures. You have a streamlining of these voices in the preliminaries to be formalized to avoid gridlock in the final decision-making processes, the formal council processes. And 9 times out of 10, because all of the work that's been done in the prelims, issues go right across, being deliberated between the Wolves and Bear clan, both together, both female and males together in this instance, and validated. These positions observed and validated by the Turtle clan. And we're just at the point in looking at the diagram in the meeting chat and making a point of the positions of where the clans are sitting, which is extrapolated right from their cosmology, right, which determines this layout. And we notice that the only clan that isn't sitting together side by side are the Turtle clan with these observers and validators. And we notice that, with the women with their backs to the west, the men with their back to the east, that when it's time for deliberation, the Wolf clan and Bear clan can deliberate amongst each other side by side. Nobody has to move. There's a walking across by the women turtles to the men, indicating how balance in coming together in given positions occurs, or the physics of it. Balance always having to come from where there is more, right? And I mentioned also right before you came in, Kaylee, this motif in the Ginyaga-Haga where the men are not able to make the first move, right? Instances of divorce, for example, the husband can't, make the call, baby, I want you back type of thing, even, right? Very cultural nuance, very interesting cultural nuance that pops up every now and then in particular contexts. And in this particular context, the turtles being the observers and validators, that if an issue or position during the deliberations isn't aligned with this these cosmologies for long-term sustainability, regenerative commons, things like this, things that don't align with their oral constitution as well, right? There's the Guyana Asada Skanagoa, right? This great law of peace, which is very hard to do research on other than this direct oral documentation and dialogue, because of so many changes to it, right? Whether you're looking at it in historical documentation or what have you, and but nonetheless, when we were exposed to what the turtles are validating against, you see the function, right? The very fundamental function of the women walking across to the men in this particular context. As I said before, if we take ourselves out of the human realm and we see regenerative commons as female and extractive scarcity-based systems as male, or approaches or lenses, we see that there's a primary and a secondary, right? Within the context of regenerative abundance, you run up against issues of scarcity and you know, things that result, right? Hyper-competitiveness, hyper-extractiveness, right? And it's through formulaic and empirical knowledge that you transform that into regenerative sustainability, right? You can see how one can encapsulate the other in one direction, but not necessarily vice versa, right? So when you're coming into positions, you're coming together in consensus on positions, it seems this is where it's important to not have the men walk across the floor, which is something that, according to the Longhouse, contributed to some of the chaos that has ensued in places like Ganawage, right? In terms of the loss of these intact protocols, the divisions amongst people who go into different band councils or tribal councils. Apparently, there was a reversing of this particular protocol where the men walked across. And you can see how just this, in the details of these mechanisms for matrilineal heritage and autonomy of not just women, but soil, water, air, right? Trees, right? Like autonomy in all of these different strains of life. When the sequence is flipped, right? There's not a capacity to come to a position together, just in that physical sense of balance having to come from where there's more, right? Or the sequence of primary and secondary. So this was a very interesting realization or dialogue with Edith in terms of what might be one of the more intricate details of the function of matrilineal autonomy in these protocols. And I don't know if all of that is super convoluted for folks, but I hope it makes sense. And what also was fascinating, right, was that I had this assumption, not being so sure, that this formalization meeting, formalization council, was the first time that all of the men and all of the women